Hello, this is Pixel Freak, and today I'm doing part 12 of the Final Fantasy Dimensions walkthrough. So this one covers Dragon Valley exclusively. Actually, I walk into the dungeon here, and then this piece of the walkthrough actually ends once I exit Dragon Valley on the other side. So at this point in time, you should actually have the little cure weed, the dragon weed, to heal up these dragons as you go. I think there's one dragon that's sick here at the front, and then there's one at the back, something like that. Or maybe they're the same dragon. I don't remember. It's been actually a while now since I recorded this. These pieces, I record them as I go through the game, but then I have to go back and do the voiceovers, so they're not getting published at the same time I'm recording them, and I'm way farther in the game than this at this point. Alright, so we're headed into the mountain, or the valley, or the dungeon, or whatever you want to call it. First treasure box is right here on the right hand side, and I haven't actually edited out the fights in this particular video. It's only 15 minutes long, so I figured I'd leave them all in. It's not that big a video. So my party at this point is actually so over leveled that I was working on some kind of extra jobs. I have 2 different guys working on being monks. So a lot of firepower in my team right now. I got a summoner, a black mage, and two monks. And most of these random battles in the valley are not too difficult. There are some dragons that you come up against, if I remember correctly. They might not be random battles, but they're a little bit more difficult. Aside from that though, most of this stuff, just your regular enemy fodder. Nothing really too dangerous. So there you go. This is the first random battle with a Drake. So you can see here, if you're a lower level than I am at this point, which you might be, I've grinded quite a bit at this point, you might want to have a white mage in your party, but for me, I think that summoners are good enough. They do a little damage, and they do a little healing at the same time, so I kind of like to use summoners if I can, at least at this point in the game. Later on, probably won't be the case. Zoo. these guys can also be a little bit of a pain in the butt, but they're nothing compared to the drakes. The drakes are the worst. Also, if you remember from my last video, the last piece of the walkthrough, I was talking a little bit about the level 2 or the tier 2 black magic spells. What I said in that video actually applies the same here. You really want to have a black mage. You really want to have access to those spells at this point in the game, because the bulk of your damage can actually be done by those black mages. I should also mention here, this valley is actually a little bit of a, I don't want to say it's a maze, but there's a lot of little side paths here, so there could be a few treasure chests that I miss. So if anybody sees something that I missed, go ahead and write it down in the comments and I'll add annotations to the video as necessary. If I don't miss anything, then great, I didn't miss anything. Once in a while that happens in these walkthrough videos, so I'll miss a treasure box and someone will be, hey, if you would have went left at this junction, you would have got a high potion or something. And I'll annotate as necessary. Oh man, killed by a summoner with a dagger. That sucks. That reminds me, I used to play, I played both EverQuest and I played EverQuest, EverQuest 2, and I played World of Warcraft for a little while. Back in the college days, I guess. And I always loved it when I'd be like at this big raid or something, and then I'd be, for some reason, meleeing, or one of the other casters would be meleeing. I always played casters in those games. But when some big mob would go down and you were the caster and you killed it with your melee attacks, so shocking. 5 damage. You killed Traknon. Good times. Haven't played an MMO in a long time, though. Oh, almost get that save spot entirely. So that's one thing that I actually kind of find annoying about this game is that if you walk over a save spot, it actually opens up a dialogue, and you think, well, I need to close the dialogue, so you touch somewhere in the screen, but then you'll walk off the save spot. You actually have to touch the buttons in the upper right-hand corner, and it gets me like every single time. So we'll make sure you save there and continue on. There is a boss in this particular area there's not always bosses I find in this game, which is kind of interesting because in most games there's almost always a boss. But in this one there's a little bit of a pseudo boss where you fight. Well, you'll see when we get there. But it's not entirely a boss, and you don't actually win. I find that this game actually employs that mechanic quite often, where you'll fight a boss, but you're either supposed to lose or you're not supposed to really win. You just kind of either last for so long or you actually have to do so much damage, and they just kind of say, okay, you win, even though the bad guy doesn't really die. So I think this is it right here, where you come up against the boss. Well, it's kind of funny there. Something very similar happens in Final Fantasy IV when you're going through the mist caverns. They say leave, and it's like, do you want to leave? And it's, what am I going to do? This is, you have to go through this point if you want to continue on with the game. So, yeah, sure, no problem. I think I'm just going to go grind for 40 hours and see what happens. No, you have to choose yes, and then you'll continue on. So you're fighting up against this character, which seems pretty clear that she's going to become a member of your party at some point in time. And she looks a lot like you. That's what I always like these fights, because it's like, this is very clearly not a sprite of an enemy. This is the sprite of a, player character type of character. So, don't have to do too much damage, and she kind of runs off. She does a little bit of damage herself, though, so you gotta make sure and cure up when you're done. You gotta be careful of your health while you're in that fight as well. You might want to use a white mage, but again, I'm so over-leveled at this point, it doesn't really matter. I get to use a summoner, and I can still be successful. So, you continue on, and that is really it for bosses in this particular dungeon. And I call it a dungeon because that's what I call these things. Area, dungeon, non-world map location. So I just wanted to double check real quick, make sure I didn't miss anything, which I did, so pick this right up. Ooh, lucky shot for me. Hit him with an Aura Blast. That Aura Blast, that's a pretty strong attack. The only problem with it is that the monk really has very little MP, and so Aura Blast really takes a good chunk out of that, but man, you do a few of those. I would almost say save those up for boss fights, because boss fights are really easy with that attack. It almost turns your monk into like a black mage. Dry Ether. So that's an item that's totally worth going back, making sure you get in that item. Because Dry Ethers, if I remember correctly, they heal either all or quite a bit of your MP up. So that's something you don't want to use right away. You might need that for a particularly tough boss in the future. Especially once your characters have quite a bit of MP. I'm not sure right off the top of my head exactly how much it heals up. I know in some games it's the full amount, and in some games it's just quite a bit, like 500 or something. Some insane amount that's tantamount to all of your MP. Alright, so I just go up here to the next save place, or the next town, and I save it here. And that's it for this piece of the walkthrough. Make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and until next time, this has been Pixel Freak.